देवदारुम स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः.
Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. It is your boy Chris Shule, aka the Esoteric Noetic, aka the Chocolate Nubian So Brother. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, this is my second broadcast into the interwebs. Thought it would be fun to do something live and perhaps respond to some comments and talk about conspiracy no, wait for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Esoteric Noetic does not deal in theories. I deal in objective reality. I deal in the truth. So we're dealing in conspiracy truths here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk about one of the biggest conspiracies. I covered a big conspiracy in the last stream dealing with the UFO agenda, aliens, extraterrestrials, little green men. Well, they're not typically green. And I wanted to talk about something else. I wanted to talk about the conspiracy of materialism. And what is that? It is this conspiracy that all there is this 5 cents reality, that there is nothing other than what the science tells us, the science right now. Now, the science right now, bearing in mind that this is a changing thing. The science a few hundred years ago would have told us that anything outside of this paradigm was hearsay, was just nonsense. Electromagnetism. When Nikola Tesla, towards the end of the 19th century, had remote control boats, people thought he was crazy. And he was using an understanding of science. Not that long ago, in the last century, they thought that heavier than air flight was impossible. And it took the Smithsonian Institute 5 years to change their paper on this being the case. 5 years after the Wright brothers had proven that heavier than air flight was possible. This was the science. This was the materialism. And of course, we have a lot of materialistic beliefs that there is nothing outside of this 5 cents reality. All there is protons, neutrons, electrons orbiting around a nucleus. Even though that the utmost science, quantum mechanics, tells us that essentially all matter comes in and out of this reality, pops in and out from a non-local point, meaning that it cannot be located within this Euclidean meat space. Like the smallest particle, electrons, or like they essentially appear and reappear outside of a non-locatable space. Now that doesn't sound very materialistic, does it? So a lot of times it comes down to our understanding. And ultimately, I love the quote, once something becomes sufficiently advanced, it becomes indistinguishable from magic. And the thing about materialism is, at the current level of understanding we have, we often deem things as being magical because we don't understand them. Because we have, a lot of the scientific academia have this personal incredulity. Ever heard of the personal incredulity fallacy? It's when someone doesn't understand something. Something is too difficult, therefore they assume that it must be conspiracy, bullhead nonsense. Oh, I don't understand this, so it's not true. It can't be real. And this is what has happened time and time again. When people do not understand how things work, be it the metaphysical realm, be it historical facts, be it psychology, be it technology, they assume that it is hocus pocus. When everything realistically, that is. Everything can be understood. We just tend to use these words. We call them hocus pocus or magic or spiritual airy-fairy stuff, when ultimately science encompasses the spiritual tradition. Real science is not just about what you can see within your own 5 cents reality. It's about what is. It's about applying a process to understand the universe. And there are many processes to achieve this. One is through gnosis, which is basically your psionic intelligence, intuition. It's the ability to ascertain knowledge and the truth through divine revelation. It's basically insight by means of these mystical powers that are latent within your consciousness that we all can tap into, but a lot of us have forgotten. A lot of times when you don't use your faculties, they atrophy. Ever seen someone that hasn't exercised for years, has barely gotten out of their chair? Their muscles atrophy. This is what happens when you're in space. When you come down to Earth, you can't even walk because you have no strength. Your muscles have atrophied. Your bones have become weak. And similarly, when it comes to using your latent abilities, when people nurture this stuff, from a young age, we tend to have these things that are, these latent abilities that are highly attuned. This is why kids often see things that their mothers don't, and mothers and fathers say couldn't possibly be. I certainly had these experiences when I was a kid. Anyway, I've digressed long enough. Fundamentally, there are many paths to understanding reality, and this thing that we call materialism shuts off any other paths that don't look at things using this process that we call science. Science now, this science 2.0. Real science, science of the ancient world, dealt with not just gnosis, it dealt with philosophy, the wisdom gained through intellectual powers, gained through reason, the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic. Also dealt with science, as far as knowledge that could be gained through the study of the physical universe, the physiology not only of the human anatomy, but of the anatomy of all things, not just the plants, the animals, but the planets, the stars, the makeup of what is, what defines reality, this Euclidean mean space. So fundamentally, ladies and gentlemen, I know that's a long waffle, but materialism tends to, the way that I define it, limit this. It's like science. It's dogmatic. It basically restricts thinking to one field. The real science is whatever I say it is, and science says, well, the establishment says that this is science, and we've proven this through testing, and that has been funded by these massive pharmaceutical companies, and therefore whatever we arrive at is real, when real science encompasses more than that. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a really important topic, because when we really gain an understanding of what is, like with certain truths about the world, we open our minds, we have these satori experiences, it wakens up to higher levels of understanding. There's this efflorescence of consciousness, and it allows us to grow. Like when you really have these awakened experiences, it opens you up. I think one of the biggest things that restricts us from growing is fear. And it's through this fear that shapes the way in which we govern our lives. I think about the fears that govern most people's lives. I'd say that there are fundamentally three fears that come to mind. Of course, I'm just extemporaneously just thinking of three now, but I'm sure there are many of them. But I think you can generalize and say, I think the greatest fear for a lot of people is the fear of death, right? Oh, now I'm going to die. When you break through from this materialistic worldview, you realize that there is more to this world than meets the eye, that you're not these bodies having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being. You are a soul having a physical experience. And you gain this by understanding the world, by having certain insights, these satori experiences that awaken you to the fact that, oh, as Master Yoda once said,
Luminous beings we are not this crude matter.
Oh, right.
Luminous beings we are.
Rather, not this crude matter. Master Yoda realized that because he'd been around for such a long time and seen so many things and had this understanding of the Force, that fundamentally we were beyond these physical, corporeal beings. I love the concept of the Force. It's basically a metaphor for spirituality that ultimately, regardless of what you want to call it, God, Buddha, Krishna, Allah, the unifying field, there is a force that binds all of us. This is known as the Force. It's based off of this philosophy of Shintoism. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've covered this enough. I wanted to talk about the conspiracy of physical existence, materialism, in reference to us simply being these beings that live in this 5 sense reality. There's certain people that have actually gained an insight into things outside of this extended vision. And it's not such a crazy thought. We know that there are certain animals, for instance, that have extended vision that we've actually understood scientifically, that we can actually test, we can measure. We know platypus have a sixth sense. They have an electromagnetic beak that can sense the muscle contractions within other animals. Therefore, they move before these animals, the platypus, they actually move before the animals move. And that is a sixth sense. We understand that we have access to senses outside of what some animals do, outside of what human beings do. And there are some people that fine-tune their senses. And I want to talk about this guy called DJ that has tapped into his force abilities. And I'm not talking force in this crazy Star Wars imaginatory sense. No, I'm talking about the real deal, ladies and gentlemen. People that can tap into their chi energy and extend their vision beyond this materialistic world. All right, so let's have a look at this video I came across of one of the most astounding characters that is able to do things that make him seem like he's an anime character outside of a Star Wars movie. All right, let's rock.
I first met him in the early 80s in a Chinatown of urban Java. He didn't want his real name or address revealed, so we called him DJ for Dynamo Jack. He was only a healer, he said, but he did direct a powerful energy generated from his own body into his patients. Sometimes he used the needles, sometimes just his hands. He called the energy chi, and it was so strong that he usually needed a grounder to hold his patients' feet. For years we followed him around Java on his healing rounds, pleading to be allowed to film him, but he always refused, saying his powers resulted from a type of meditation with an ancient tradition of secrecy. It was only when my brother Lorne was suffering from a serious eye infection that he finally allowed us to film him in 1987.
So for those of you that are watching this and are not familiar with this, so this character DJ is a real flesh and blood character that, and there are many people like this. I mean, they've been featured in, I think, Ripley's Believe It or Not. There's another guy that is essentially able to manipulate his chi energy to perform tasks that are not explainable within our current understanding of science, mainstream understanding. I say our in a very general sense. Obviously, a lot of people that have a much more detailed understanding of meta-science understand how this stuff works. But yeah, the general scientific community look at this stuff as hocus pocus. And it's fascinating because these people actually exist. People that can manipulate chi energy, life force, prana, that can set things on fire. I mean, we're going to see this guy essentially light something on fire. And I know a lot of people think, oh, you know, I don't know, but bro, have you ever heard of magic tricks? Of course I have. In fact, I am someone that is very much deeply into the realm of magic. And I'm talking about, obviously, the fake stuff, illusions, mentalism, all that kind of stuff. But I also understand real magic, the kind of magic that has its origins in the Aramaic world. You know, things that deal with an understanding of spirituality, being able to influence people through psychology. The ancient Egyptians were masters of this kind of stuff. And fundamentally, this is a kind of magic. It's a kind of magic that just isn't as well understood. All magic is explainable, whether it is trickery, whether it is illusions, but some magic is outside of the understanding of a lot of people. In fact, pretty much all magic is, but it's real in the same way that technology is real. It just deals with things that people don't understand. And this DJ character is someone that has been trained in a discipline that allows him to manipulate his vitals, his life force energy, chi, and perform some miraculous things. Anyway, let's continue.
It was nothing like any acupuncture I'd ever had. I was getting really powerful electric shocks and couldn't control my movements at all.
Yin yang, positive and negative, you know. And my positive from here and my negative from here. And we meet together, this can get like electricity.
And is this because You're special? You have a special sort of
It's
body?
meditation every day.
It's meditation that does it.
Meditation every day. Like you can touch me.
I love how he says that. A lot of people have this idea that people that can do this kind of stuff are special. And in a sense, they are, in the fact that they've tapped into something that most people do not have access to. But in the same way that an athlete that has trained his body to do phenomenal things, he can run 100 meters under 10 seconds, something that the vast majority, 99% of the population, cannot do. Or someone that has trained himself to be able to withstand ridiculous, inhuman amounts of pain. In the same way, you can harness these abilities by disciplining yourself, by practicing certain techniques, and they've been around for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians were practicing this. Obviously, within the Eastern world, these are hugely understood. The Vedic texts speak about these disciplines. I mean, India has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and they have all these disciplines dealing with the manipulation of this. I mean, through the Kundalini energy, whether it is yoga. If you've heard of Kundalini yoga, it taps into the same vital energies that essentially DJ is manipulating. And this can be used to do amazing things. And it's interesting that many, many civilizations make reference to this. Obviously, in Japan, they refer to this as ki energy. China, chi energy. There are many different names for this. In India, prana, life force, or the Kundalini energy. But fundamentally, we're referring to what I like to call the force. That energy, that life force that binds all of us, and it can be used to achieve great things.
It's nothing, okay? It's my burn. It's just like this.
For our sound recordist, it was also a shocker. He then took our newspaper outside and showed us how chi can also be used to set things on fire.
I never get sick of seeing this, and I know the skeptics are going to have a field day with this one. This is because look, I've seen all of this. Obviously, this stuff can be faked, and I've seen many magicians fake this kind of stuff. But it's one thing when you get a bunch of skeptics to try to disprove what you're doing, and you're seeing this stuff in real time. And this is basically what DJ went through. A bunch of we'll see this in the video, but a bunch of skeptics actually came down to try to test what this guy was doing, and they got their instrumentation. And granted, look, they weren't able to disprove that this guy was doing what he was doing. It's interesting to see that the way in which they were trying to measure this stuff, like to measure his chi energy, using the clunky scientific instrumentation, the instrumentation wasn't responding to this stuff, because we have this idea in science that unless we can measure something within our scientific apparatus, it doesn't exist. When there are certain things, but obviously there are certain energies, certain things that are beyond our scientific range, our understanding. I remember hearing Neil deGrasse Tyson once talk about how, look, you have a look at the history of science, and we've expanded our understanding of different energies and different things. And for instance, there was a time when we didn't believe in microbes, and there was a time when we didn't believe in electromagnetic energy, and we developed instrumentation to be able to detect these things. But then he made the outrageous statement that, I believe that because we have discovered all of these scientific instrumentation to detect these things, that we pretty much have an understanding of everything, which was the most ridiculous thing that I ever heard. So basically, science, which has the default position of constantly questioning its default position, expanding its awareness. Now, he's saying that because we've done all this testing and we've done all this research, now we don't need to develop any more instrumentation. We don't need to expand our understanding of different energies because we understand everything there is. How incredibly arrogant and stupid is that? Obviously, there is a lot that we are continuing to learn every single day, every single year in science. And the understanding of these and how this stuff works is another thing we need to understand. Just because our instrumentation fails to understand this stuff, because we have personal incredulity and we say we can't understand how this works, doesn't mean it's not real. The biggest proof of science is reality. If something works, something is, it is. Our role is trying to understand how this stuff works. But to simply just rule this out as being nonsense because we don't understand it is one of the faults in many of the scientific people. I'm not going to say science because obviously science consists of many different factions, but this is one of the faults we find within the mainstream scientific academia. But this stuff was observed in the real and was had a lot of scientific instrumentation used to verify it.
When he heard we'd shown this footage in public, he was very upset and refused all our future efforts to contact him again. As the years passed, we sadly resigned ourselves to never seeing him again. My brother Lorne never did, for by 1997 he was already dead, when I again found myself with DJ, now treating me for an eye problem.
This is very interesting that DJ was very apprehensive about this stuff being shown to the mainstream, and it follows the general theme you find with a lot of these esoteric wisdom traditions. I mean, you have a look at the Gnostics. Many of the Gnostic orders are the students of Pythagoras. They were very secretive about a lot of these things, because what would often happen to people when they would show certain knowledge that people weren't ready for? History tells us that they were essentially killed, crucified, or ostracized, made out to be conspiracy theorists, had their lives ruined, or it would have a detrimental effect on them or their establishment. Therefore, it became a tradition. This is applied to the Pythagorean schools, where they had secrecy. They had years of initiation, for instance, before they were even given this knowledge, and this was to protect them. This has been the tradition in many of these ancient wisdom traditions, to avoid sharing this information with the general masses, because one, it can do them harm, as in individuals that are, a lot of times it can do individuals harm if they hadn't gained mastery of the knowledge. Therefore, before they could even really tap into this stuff, there was a lot of time devoted towards understanding these disciplines. But more importantly, if they shared information, if they spoke openly about this kind of stuff, it could affect the group. It could affect them as individuals. They could be persecuted. Therefore, there was a common theme of secrecy within these traditions, and it would follow that similarly with DJ's understanding the school that he has been initiated into, they have the same reservation about showing this information to the general masses. So I just found it very interesting that he was unwilling to show this stuff. You know, they say don't cast pearls at swine. Reason being is a lot of people, one, aren't ready for this information. Two, it'll do you a lot of harm, and you'll find you're wasting your energy. You will go blue in the face arguing with people, trying to prove to them that certain things are real. My experience has shown me that you shouldn't waste your time. You know, look, you don't have to attend every battle you're invited to. I'm all for conversation, but I just don't have the time to be arguing with every single person. I've done the research. I understand things. If you have something to throw my way, I will look at it, but you can take it or leave it, you know? Open yourself up to people that are willing to be open to the information, but you'll just be wasting your time if you try to convince people, and it will often end up in your ruination. And this is what history has taught us.
But it wasn't this that brought me back. He had tracked me down out of the blue and invited me to tell me a story. He had just returned from 2 years on a deep meditational journey, alone in the heart of Borneo. Amongst his revelations, he had seen, he said, how history was moving on into great change, and the old wisdom was vanishing. So he'd called me back to film just enough of him to remind us that we all have undreamed of powers sleeping within us, and that there's nothing special about him except for his training in waking them. Grounding this patient, my cameraman Joe is having to use all his weight to keep contact. But she is pushing him He seems able to control the amplitude of this chi.
I find this stuff so fascinating because, for the skeptics out there, it's one thing when you get actors to play along, but there's certain things that you can't control like that. It's so easy for people that even have a modicum of intelligence to see when people are reacting to things that are involuntary. And these people, 100%, are not playing around. They're not acting. And it's even more evident when he does this to kids. I mean, kids more often than not are horrible actors, so that you can tell that they're being real about this. Obviously, this guy is doing something that is eliciting this involuntary response. And the question is how it's happening. Now, mainstream science throws all of these ideas to try to explain what's going on here when it tries to explain acupuncture and these systems, and it doesn't understand it. And it's interesting that the explanation for this has obviously been cultivated for thousands of years. When you have a look at China, when it deals with acupuncture, they've been practicing these disciplines for well over 1,000 years, and they have a detailed understanding of this. But the scientific community refuses to accept this because it deals with things outside of their scientific understanding. Oh, what's this? You're talking about like meridians and you're talking about like energy centers and chakras. No, mate, that stuff doesn't exist. It can't be real. Oh, no, mate. No, I don't understand that, so obviously can't be real. And this is what tends to happen time and time again. It's the same thing that happened with the evolution of science. There was a time when we had Newtonian physics, pretty much explaining everything, and then here comes quantum mechanics. This thing that blows the current understanding of science outside of the water. But the scientific community, they were super skeptical about adopting it because they don't understand it. And this is real science. Real science forces you to throw away your current understanding of things and opening yourself up to a better understanding of things. And this is what the real scientists, the initiators of the scientific method, Sir Francis Bacon, who was the founder of the scientific method, was a proponent of. Real scientists, even going back further than that, following this tradition, would try to understand things not just within the physical realm, but within the metaphysical realm as well. This is what Pythagoras strived to do. Pythagoras was the first universal genius, someone that understood the physics, but also the metaphysics, and would speak deeply about this. Hermes Trismegistus was considered to be the most brilliant scientist of his time. Trismegistus referencing the fact that he was 3 times great. He understood the 3 disciplines: the metaphysics, the technology, the science, and cultivated an understanding of this through his teachings. Anyway, I digress. Let's see if we can get through all of this without going for several hours. I tend to waffle on.
Like a dimmer switch, and it causes uncontrollable responses in the patients and their grounders.
I can barely keep my hand on you. It wants to fly off. The electricity's so strong.
This mother unwittingly grounds her child.
Now check this out. This kid clearly isn't
He
faking.
won't sit still, so she's asked to hold him and grin and bear it. Sometimes signs of this passing energy can be seen in the transmitter too.
I mean, look at that. What is that for? I mean, oh no, mate. Look, that could be CGI. I find it fascinating showing people this evidence and trying to see them try to weave their justifications for how this isn't real. Some people will not believe something if they don't want to believe, and there's nothing you can do. So when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's the kind of information that I tend to show people if I feel as if they're ready for it, they're open to it, but I'm not interested in convincing people. Because if you can show people this kind of evidence and their attitude is, oh, look, mate, no, I still don't believe it. Oh, yeah, it could have been fake CGI, fake actors. No, I mean, yeah, it could be real, but it's not like magic. It's just it's muscle contraction control. He's just using, like, techniques of Bro, really?
This chi stuff is only the surface, he says, of the real adventure beneath, in the meditational technique.
Okay, now we're getting serious. This is fascinating because you know how you watch all these anime movies like Dragon Ball Z where they're conjuring fireballs, spirit bombs, and all that kind of stuff, and they're tapping into the energy life force? And they like that stuff seems ridiculous, right? Well, it's based on this fundamental idea. I mean, this stuff comes from traditions of understanding about these disciplines, and there's always a seed of truth to this kind of stuff. And you get to see DJ essentially display shit that seems like it's right out of an anime movie.
Projecting chi from the palm of the hand can also be used to resist rifle pellets, he says. First, you learn to distinguish between yin and yang chi in your body. Then how to pool it in your navel chakra. Then how to project it, he says. And it's the proportionate mixture between yin and yang which accounts for different effects, like pulling or pushing objects or igniting them. Then he gets really strange. He says that mastering yin chi is the key to the spirit world. There's a long tradition of Indonesian krisis being possessed by spirits. So people bring him their krisis to see if they're duds.
And ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I'm showing you this video, I mean, a lot of people think, well, what's the point of this? Is that once you awaken yourself to the possibilities, to the fact that we are not these, as Yoda says, we are luminous beings we are, not this crude matter, that there is more to the physicality than meets the eye. It opens you up to the fact that there is more to this life than just living, working 9 to 5, and then dying, and then ceasing to exist. And once you realize that there is more to this existence, that there is a part of you that lives on, that there are elements to this reality that we do not understand, it opens up your mind. It lets go of your fear. The fear that restricts people from wanting to take chances, stand for things because they feel like their life is limited and they will die. This fear of death is a very powerful thing. And one of the most powerful things in freeing yourself from this fear is growth, understanding that you are not this physical body, to break yourself out from the materialism trap. And information like this, whether it's ascertained through knowledge, understanding, or through these Satori experiences, it all paves the way in breaking you from the grips of these fears.
Here he says he doesn't manipulate matter by projecting mixtures of yin and yang chi. He merely creates a field of yin energy in which, he says, if there's a spirit, it can manifest itself. So I invited a small group of scientists back from the United States with measuring equipment to test if DJ was for real. And if so, where might this energy belong on the electromagnetic spectrum? Catherine Cook.
Here we go, using our science, our rudimentary science, to try to explain things that we have no understanding of. Oh, it doesn't make sense because I can't interpret this with my science.
Science Foundation in Texas. Dr. Roger Nilsson, a Swedish medic and international racing sailor. Dr. Greg Simpson, a physicist from New York's Albert Einstein University. And Andreas Polak, one of DJ's Australian students. The visitors are confident they'll uncover him as a fraud in no time. Greg is the first guinea pig, and he's uncomfortable about showing that he can feel anything at all. Dr. Roger doesn't know what to expect.
Oh, look, mate. No, I don't know about this. Oh, look, it's some kind of magic. I don't know. I think he just pulled, like, some kind of hypnosis on me, which is all fake, by the way. Oh, look, it's fake. I just know it's fake. I can't explain it. It's fake.
Out comes the metal detector, like the things they use in airports, to see if he has any concealed metal in his body. Then the voltmeter, to try and measure the chi. But how to get it to work? Where's the ground? What settings? DJ suggests that as his negative is his perineum, and his positive is his navel chakra, perhaps that's where the electrode should be attached.
Fascinating.
He doesn't stand on his dignity. He's eager to help. but still no readings. They're getting shocks off his arm, and now they're on the right settings, but the needle still isn't moving. DJ says it isn't electricity, it's chi.
Exactly.
1, 2, oh, I feel it in my whole...
And I have no doubt, at some point, we will develop instrumentation that will be able to detect this. And look, I'm not talking about e-meters. I know there are a lot of Scientologists out there. I don't think they detect chi energy. But look, in the same way that there was a time when we couldn't detect electromagnetic fields and a lot of the things that we have in this day and age. There was a time when many of Tesla's inventions seemed like heresy, and in fact they were deemed that. A few hundred years ago, people were burnt at the stake, witches, for dealing in the occult. And the occult is essentially that which is hidden. It basically defines, science was considered the occult world a few hundred years ago. And there's a lot of science to this day that is not understood by the current scientific community. You have a look at the origins of science, and they come from the occult. Alchemy, that's where we get chemistry. Much of our understanding of mathematics comes about through sacred geometry. Most of the initiators of this stuff, they dealt in the occult. And this is why they have to keep this stuff secretive, because people that don't understand this stuff have always been quick to call people that deal in these affairs heretics and witches, when fundamentally they are dealing in the understanding of that which is. And that's fundamentally what the journey, what life is all about, understanding yourself, developing your mind, your body, your intuition. But granted, look, there are dangers that come with this kind of stuff. This is why some religions actually guard against this. In the same way a lot of the esoteric traditions guarded people from dealing with this stuff, unless, of course, they had gone through the initiations they were ready. Many religions advise against dealing in these affairs because they are dangerous. You can open yourself up into negative influences, not just physically causing yourself harm, because you're dealing with things that you don't understand from the physical sense, but also on a metaphysical level. Like with anything, like in current mainstream science, there are certain things that we deal with that can have dangerous effects on us, like boom shakalakas, if you know what I mean. And people are always quick to experiment with things before they fully understand them. This is one of the downsides to science, and it is the same issue that we deal with in the occult.
Body, I feel it. At 0.3, I feel it in my legs. Shit.
But suspecting there's some tricky setup on his premises they can't find, they insist we all go to a randomly chosen hotel room several miles away to see if he can light a light bulb with his fingers. It doesn't ground on the wall. So Greg holds and grounds one wire, while DJ pumps chi through the other. The bulbs are LEDs, light-emitting diodes, which ignite in different colors according to the intensity of current.
It's pretty impressive.
On, off, on.
Brilliant.
Oh, you're blinking.
Things were going well.
It's interesting that this energy, this life force, doesn't seem to be able to be detected with their instrumentation in the same way that we can detect positive and negative currents, but it can still be used to charge things that are powered by electricity. So it's it has some application in the physical world. It's not just limited to the metaphysical. It's fascinating, and I think, as I keep saying, in time we will develop a greater understanding of this stuff. But to simply throw this away, and because there is a lot of crazy nonsense stuff out there. A lot of people think that everything that is airy-fairy must be true. No, there's a lot of nonsense out there, but there's also a lot of legit things. And this, my friends, is definitely legit.
DJ was enjoying it too, until he invited us all out to lunch at his local, where he tried to push a chopstick through the table. He couldn't get it through the Formica surface, so he came up through an inch of wood from underneath.
Wow.
Not only did he draw his own blood, but a chopstick splinter had caught Alison here between the eyes, drawing more. The incident was laughed off apologetically, but next morning he was a different man, drawn and upset. He said he'd been visited all night by his long-dead master, raging that he had broken the strict taboos of his sect, never to show off in public and never to cause harm or draw blood. He felt deeply chastised. All further testing and filming must end. Never again would he submit to public scrutiny, nor accept any new students. He would sink from sight and continue his healing in obscurity, as he had done since before we met him in the early 80s, and had always told us was right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. That is the story of DJ. And it's interesting that he's been brought up in this school where they're apprehensive about showing the general public this kind of information. This is a common theme we find within a lot of these esoteric traditions. I mean, it's not always the case. There are those, you have, just like you have good scientists, ladies and gentlemen, and you have bad scientists, those that will use their knowledge, their understanding, and enforce their will on others in order to create a society that they want. This isn't this malicious, twisted, obfuscated idea of science. You have those that actually have principles that won't perform experimentation, for instance, unless, of course, it's voluntary. Of course, they use science in order to progress humanity. And in the same way, we find this in the world of magic, the occult, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just a different kind of science. You find there are people that have principles, like DJ, and one of them is that they're apprehensive about harming anyone, about showing people information that they feel the world isn't ready for or may have some kind of negative impact on people's lives and so forth. And then, of course, you have those that have no scruples whatsoever. And make no mistake about it, there are people in the mainstream, the elite, that do use these techniques, whether it be hypnosis, whether it be the understanding of astrology, numerology. And of course, a lot of people don't understand this, so they think it's hearsay. They think it's nonsense. But they use this in order to manipulate people in a negative way. They use these techniques in order to bring power. And this is the world that has always been, at least since the dawn of time. It's been this spiritual battle where there are those that will use their powers in order to enslave others, and those that will use it in order to uplift the vibration of the planet. But nonetheless, we need to continue to strive to understand ourselves and understand the universe, to grow. And the law of mentalism tells us that the more that we uplift our fellow brothers and sisters in awareness and understanding of the world, the more that we uplift the society. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed that. Oh, we got some, I know I've missed a lot of questions, so I'm going to see if I can answer a few of them. I got my monitor on a different screen over here, so let me see if there's anything I can address for you guys. Boom shakalaka. All right. Okay, so Midori Sato says, ask a scientist whether patterns exist. Evolution, for example, is there an atom of it, a particle? Of course not, because material is not the only thing which exists. Exactly. Well said. Well said. Reality comes from our senses, which are being bombarded by the artificial simulation, according to Blood Raw Truth. Well, our concept of reality comes from our senses a lot of the times, but there is a real reality, as in an immutable reality. I mean, I think people talk about the observer principle, the fact that the way in which you observe reality actually influences it, and that is true. And our perception of reality definitely influences reality. There's this thing called consensus reality, how us being combined in our thoughts, how the way in which we perceive things also influences reality. But there is also an objective reality. It's interesting because all of these things are true and they're also not true. Reality is objective, but it is also subjective. There is this paradox where there is an immutable, definitive existence in regards to reality, but also we influence this through our observation of it. And that's what I've come to realize anyway. Did I hear about the passing of Jeff C. according to Stephen Elage? Jeff C. Who's Jeff C? I don't know. I know a few Jeffs. I know Jeff Berwick, but not a Jeff C. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. I will let you know when I'm going to drop down for another live stream. Until next time, peace. Peace out. Keep it real. Don't drive and text. This is the esoteric noetic, aka the chocolate Nubian soul brother. Be sure to like this video. Smash the share button. You know what it is. Peace be upon your buck sheets. Peace in the Middle East. Suri Namaskara. Namaste. Ow!